It's a common trope in American history to say the United States is a country of immigrants. Yet the reality is quite different. The USA has always had a love-hate relationship with immigration. Although in the case of the SS St. Louis, the U.S. denied the entrance of Jewish refugees, it does not make this ideal any less noble or true. In May 1939, tensions across Germany, as well as all of Europe, were reaching a breaking point. 7 months after Kristallnacht, Jews in Germany were fully aware of the horrors on the horizon. Some had been on the run, some in concentration camps, some had been waiting to be imprisoned, and all were seeking an opportunity to escape. These were the 937 men, women, and children that would cross the Atlantic Ocean in hopes of safety and security. On May 13th, over 900 Jewish refugees departed Hamburg, Germany, for Havana, Cuba, aboard the SS St. Louis, not realizing the international and political circumstances that surrounded their fate. The captain of the ship was Gustav Schroeder, and on the night of the departure, he made a note in his diary of the nervous disposition in the passengers. Many were heavy-hearted to leave their homes, but the captain was hopeful. Perhaps the long sea voyage would erase the sore memories of land. Passengers began to enjoy the voyage and the company of each other. Children became friends and families were at ease. Each day brought them closer to their new lives in Cuba. Yet the refugees could still not escape the uncertainty of the future. On Friday, June 2nd, the St. Louis reached Cuba, but they could not enter the country. The Cuban government saw the refugees as a threat, a belief fueled by economic worries and poor immigration laws that halted any progress of negotiations on behalf of the refugees. Cuban officials claimed that the passengers' landing certificates were invalid. As the wait prolonged from hours to days, the uncertainty manifested into anxiety and fear on the St. Louis. The Cuban president, Federico Bru, was persistent in forbidding the refugees to land. Passenger Gerda Blockman-Wilkford recalls what it was like on the ship at the time.
Well, as you can imagine, there was a terrible mood. Everybody was very depressed. Few people tried to commit suicide. I think the one man, I think he cut his wrists, and he was the only one who landed because they had to take him to the hospital to tend to him. I don't know whether he stayed or not. I think he did. He must have been the only one who stayed. But, humans are always hopeful. We always cling to the hope something is going to happen. They're not going to let us rot on the ocean. I mean, something had to happen to us. Of course, the fear was that we would go back to Germany. That was a big thing.
After 6 days of failed renegotiations, Captain Schroeder was forced to turn the ship to Florida, hoping that the U.S. would welcome the refugees. Unfortunately, President Roosevelt was on the eve of re-election and deemed it too great of a political risk. Polling showed 83% of Americans opposed increasing quota numbers to welcome German Jews. At the time, many Americans were openly anti-Semitic, themselves being earlier immigrants from European nations where anti-Semitism was endemic. Additionally, as World War II had not begun yet, most Americans favored isolationism. So, Roosevelt commanded the Coast Guard to prevent the St. Louis from entering U.S. waters, while the politicians debated. But the American government had already decided the fate of the refugees when they made it to Cuba. If the St. Louis passengers weren't allowed into Cuba, they would be refused entry into America. With no other options, the St. Louis was forced to return to Europe. On June 20th, 1939, the SS St. Louis docked in Belgium, carrying 907 passengers. With the German invasion of Western Europe in 1940, many of the St. Louis passengers were again trapped under Nazi rule. In the end, 709 survived the war, but 227 perished at the hands of the Nazis. Many found safety across Europe, and some even in the United States. Nonetheless, the story is tragic, and it has come to be known as the Voyage of the Damned. But it gives Americans cause to reflect on the kind of nation we want to be in the world, to investigate the truth of our history, and the consequences of our actions.